Welcome everyone to our videos all about energy, metaphysics, anything spiritual. We love to share our knowledge with all of you. I'm joined by Yaila and Peyton. And today's subject that we're going to talk about is healthy boundaries. It's a great topic. So why don't we start with you, Yaila? What have you got on healthy boundaries?
And automatically I'm going to start giggling because somebody that I went to school with, the intuition classes, she used to say I had a stick up my butt because she she thought I had too many boundaries. And maybe at the time for her I did, but it makes me laugh because for other people who may not exercise boundaries for themselves, somebody who is really holding their own space and kind of holding the bar for what they find acceptable for themselves and not, you can come across like you might have a stick up your ass for other people. I actually don't mind with that, because what I've found, the times where I have let my boundaries get walked over, I've always paid for it in the end. So talking about healthy boundaries, it's something that when you have structures for your own energy and your own life put into place, it actually gives you more freedom and trust within yourself and other people. Other people can understand what you need and how they can interact with you with certain boundaries in place. And when it comes to our energy, we learn what those boundaries look like, and each of us has our own. So what are healthy boundaries when it comes to energy? I've kind of learned for myself that the times and places where I either forgot about a boundary or pushed aside a boundary to appease somebody else, it looked like I just felt uncomfortable the entire time. Communication was hard. I didn't have as much fun. I was too much in my head, kind of over analyzing. I was worried. Sometimes I actually felt fearful for my own safety. I just felt unsafe and worried and fearful the whole time. So when my boundaries are upheld, I feel more safe. I feel more confident in speaking my truth. I feel more at ease, and I actually have more fun. So for you watching, deciding what a boundary is for you, you usually learn where a boundary needs to be when it's been overstepped. And so it's looking at those places for yourself of, did I not share a need that I needed? For some people, time is a really big thing. For them, they only have so much time and space in their day, and they really say no to a lot of other people and things to make space for interacting with you or wherever they're going. And not everybody thinks of time like that. So I'm not going to say one is better than the other, but just kind of knowing what a boundary is for someone and say, okay, when I'm saying I'm going to meet you here, a boundary for me is if you can't be there at that time, just let me know so I can make adjustments. Or sometimes if somebody overshares too much and maybe you aren't ready emotionally, physically, spiritually to have that dump on you. Some people just will continue to dump all their problems on someone, and the person maybe receiving that may not be ready for that. So having a healthy boundary between yourself and the other person would be, hey, I have some things I want to share. Do you have time to listen? Is okay if I share with you? And that way the person can kind of decide which of the two they're ready for. So it's just kind of being conscious of energetically, where are you? Are you upholding your own energy where you feel safe, where you trust that you can honestly share, that you can honestly receive? There's certain boundaries that we need to look at for ourselves. And if it starts to feel uncomfortable, we start to feel unsafe, we start to feel anxious or worried, it's checking in with ourselves and saying, okay, well, why do I feel that way? What do I need to say differently? How do I need to interact with this differently? I know one of our previous videos about being an energy snob, energy really taught me about boundaries. So going into those situations or places that I learned for myself were just really uncomfortable. It took too much work on my end to kind of recalibrate and get back to my own groundedness by being in these crazy, chaotic spaces. That was just a boundary I had to start setting up and saying, you know what? I love that you love that. Go ahead, have fun. I'll meet up with you later. So there's certain situations I've just had to learn to say, it just doesn't work for me. Cause even if the times that I've tried to let the boundary go and be like, oh, maybe I am being too like uptight about it. I went there and I just didn't have fun. And it was just so much more work to get myself recalibrated. So I had to learn what healthy boundaries were. And it was basically tapping into how do I feel in those situations and with those certain people. Do I feel like it was an even exchange? Do I feel like I could be honest in myself? Or did I always feel like I was walking on eggshells, or I couldn't quite feel comfortable around a certain person? I didn't know why at first. These are things to look at as far as what your healthy boundaries might be. And again, putting up those boundaries actually gives you more trust, safety, and freedom in your own space when you kind of have these anchor points for yourself. So that's how I'd start off with healthy boundaries. But how about you, Peyton?
I think that's a great way to look at it. And I think that the topic of boundaries is so important for those of us who are light workers and starseeds, especially because anyone who is on this path is doing intuitive work or spiritual work. One of the things that happens is, first of all, you get more sensitive. And so I think light workers in particular, starseeds as well, can fall into a couple traps where boundaries are concerned. And I have learned all of these the hard way myself. So these are all mistakes that I have made that I try to share with my clients so that maybe they have a little easier go of it than I did. But when I think of boundaries, especially for anyone on their spiritual path, the first thing that comes to my mind is energy boundaries. And we talked about this in our energy protection video, but it is really the first thing that I would mention to anyone, especially if they are newly awakened. And so many people, we are going through mass awakenings right now. And so some of us kind of, if we've been on this road for a while, we take it for granted a little. But for anyone who is new to the awakening process and just starting to find their way, one of the most important things to kind of wrap your mind around as a first step with boundaries for me is energy protection. Having some tools to keep your energy to yourself and to keep everyone else's energy out. And this was something, and we've talked about this in earlier videos, that I had no concept of this when I first started my awakening process. And I didn't know I was a huge empath. And so empaths and sensitives, and even if you don't consider yourself to be one of those, if you're doing this work, you're getting more sensitive. So having ways to protect your energy, whether that is energy tools, the kind that the three of us teach and have talked about in our earlier videos, for me is step number one, because especially as things kind of ramp up in the collective, which we were just talking about in our November energy report, things are going to get more intense, and the people around us are starting to step on boundaries. And so being able to protect yourself, have your own energy tools to just hold your energy as a clean, safe space around you is always my first step when I think of boundaries. But the other thing that kind of comes to mind when I think of healthy boundaries for sensitives, light workers, intuitives, is about feeling safe to be yourself. Because one of the things that the guides are telling us is critical to our ascension journey is being our authentic self. And that is so hard for us in this society. And I know that the three of us have talked about this before, about when we first started this journey, we kind of kept this to ourselves. Because there's a feeling when you're first starting, especially if you're one of the first ones in your friend group, your family, to awaken, to start to become conscious, you can feel like an outsider, or that they're going to think you're crazy, or that this doesn't go with the way you were raised, with your family beliefs, your religious beliefs. And so we tend to stifle ourselves. And our whole job as light workers is to share our light, to share our authentic truth. And if we're holding that back because we're afraid it's going to ruffle feathers, we're not being our authentic self. And there are good reasons why most of us don't feel comfortable with this at some point in our journey. whether that is the fear of rejection, which is very real. You know, we don't want to be rejected by our friends who all of a sudden think that we're a little crazy or aren't comfortable with what we're reading and watching and talking about. So that's a very real concern. But when we stifle ourselves to make other people happy, we're not holding our own boundaries. We're sacrificing ourselves and our truth to make someone else happy. And so that's one way that I see a lot of light workers and sensitives not holding boundaries, is not feeling safe to be our authentic self. And that's a big part of our job here, of what we're here to do, is to shine our light. And so if we're always hiding that, we're not really living up to our potential and the job we took on as light workers. So having boundaries in terms of being your authentic self. And one of the ways that this shows up for so many people is saying yes to things you don't want to say yes to. You know, how many things do you have on your calendar that you really don't want to do? How many people are you still talking to, hanging out with, that you know are not a vibrational match to you anymore, but you're doing it because you don't want to make waves? Or, and I love that Yaila used this in one of our recent videos, obligation. Where are you acting out of obligation and not authenticity? Because you're letting your boundaries slide. So as light workers, we are getting more particular about what we are investing our time and energy in. And I think that is key to holding our boundaries as light workers and spiritual workers, because more people are going to be coming to you, needing your help, needing your guidance. And if you're not being your authentic self, you don't have a whole lot to share. And then the one other thing that comes up to me with boundaries is that I'm seeing in so many of my clients at times, and have done myself, is where we don't respect other people's boundaries. And that is because as light workers, it is very easy to slip into thinking we need to save other people. We need to heal everyone. And that's because it's so hard for us to see suffering. And there's so much of that going on. And we just want to pull everyone along with us because we know we have tools and information that can help them. But what we have to recognize, and what the guides always remind me, we're not here to save anyone. We're here to shine our light and make it available, but we have to respect the free will of everyone else. And so we have to be careful that we're not overstepping boundaries with good intention, which most of us are doing, but also realizing that we can sometimes not be respectful of where other people are in their journey. And the way that I often see this showing up is so many light workers feel the need to wake everyone else up. And how many of us have not thought of this? We just want everyone to wake up. What is wrong with them? And again, you know, boundaries, you know, we're here to be authentic, to shine our light, to help, but not to force. We're not here to be a sledgehammer. So when you're authentic and shining your light, you're holding your own boundaries and you're respecting the boundaries of others. So those are the three thoughts that come to my mind when I think of ways that we as light workers can kind of trample boundaries, or maybe not have great boundaries. So how about you, Corey? How do boundaries come up for you?
Well, you know, I have my Saturn placement in my natal chart is, my Saturn is in Pisces, which is one of the hardest placements to have. And what does that mean? Well, it means that, you know, I came here to learn about boundaries. So I did not have any boundaries because I was born a twin. So I was, you know, I mean, I was a 2, I wasn't 1. And I was doing, you know, exactly like what you're talking about, Peyton, you know, saving everybody, helping everybody. You know, I had no boundaries. And that was the way I was raised. It didn't matter whether I liked it or not. You just do as you're told. And don't make any waves. Don't be selfish. And so there was, I lived a lot of years with absolutely no boundaries until I literally was kind of like beaten to a pulp. You know, I was killing myself, you know, and allowing people to treat me not so kindly. You know, I was that doormat, you know, people just rub their feet on, you know, and I'm like, I'm okay, you know, as I'm like drowning in the water, really, I'm okay. And what has been boundary saving, life saving for me was when I got into doing energy work and learning about energy work. I knew that I needed boundaries, but I really didn't know how to have them. And I had, tried to learn a bit about boundaries, but it just wasn't resonating with me. So when I was into getting into the spiritual awakening was because I was in a situation where I was trying to have boundaries and yet I was just being trampled all over. And I just did not know how to have healthy boundaries because I wasn't taught. It's not, my parents' fault. It's just the way it was. So when I started learning about energy work, my whole point was, oh my gosh, I can't wait to learn how to have, energy protection. For me at that time, that was a boundary. I could actually learn to have energetic boundaries without having to really open my mouth and state boundaries. And a lot of times I would get into situations that got so far, being that doormat, that by the time I recognized really what was going on, it was too late. So to learn energy work is I got to learn, first of all, boundaries. What is my energy and what is not my energy? Because I, as an empath, extreme empath, I always thought that other people's energy was my energy because of that empathy that I have for others. And so that was a big start for me, to learn what was my energy and what was somebody else's. And it was a big, huge jump start, almost like a quantum leap into learning about boundaries. It was just first what was mine and what wasn't mine. So automatically I knew, well, what's mine is mine, and what's other people's energy is other people's energies. So if it's not mine, I don't own it. And if it's not mine and I'm working on me, I don't have to fix it. And then came, the energy protection. We have videos on all this, which is so great. Everything that we talk about, there's another video and another video to learn about the things that we talk about as well. But, that energy protection, I just needed energy protection before I even started working on verbalizing boundaries for me. And so that energy protection, because by the time I started this journey, I have major PTSD. So I didn't know, if my head was up or down. I had no idea. All I knew is that I didn't like it. It was very uncomfortable. And that was a sign, like Yaila was saying, that boundaries were being crossed. So the energy protection was amazing. I could feel safe in my own energy protection. And I could take out what wasn't mine and give it back to whoever it belonged to. And so at first for me, when it came to having healthy boundaries, I had to feel safe within myself, in my own little space. And then, it just grew from there. It grew from there, not needing to fix people, not needing to save people. And the big thing is who's allowed in my space and who's not allowed in my space. That because I had learned the difference between my energy and somebody else's, that when different people I would allow certain people into my space, which could be my home, it could be, my car, or just any place, a restaurant, right? I started to be able to differentiate what really resonated with me, not the tapes in my upbringing that that my upbringing was telling me, but actually mine. I could start to differentiate, what energy was okay for me and what wasn't, what was uncomfortable, and what wasn't uncomfortable. And as I started to do that, I started to actually love myself, trust myself, and from there be able to empower myself. And then I could work on healthy boundaries. So for me, it was that build up, because I knew for years, and I had tried different ways to have healthy boundaries. But what really worked for me was the energy work, which is what was meant to be. So, those healthy boundaries is not being with people that I don't want to be with, not going places that I don't want to go. Being able to say no. That was a huge one for me. Being able to say no. And in the beginning, it came out as no. And I'd have to apologize. But, now I can say, no, thank you. And be okay with it. And not beat myself up. And not judge myself. And really not get into self-pity either. But that I deserve to have, I deserve to have healthy boundaries. Because in the beginning of this journey, I didn't even know that I deserved healthy boundaries. And today, because of the energy work and starting from the basics, for those of you who are new, the basics were vital for me. They were vital for me because I had to build up my energy, my self-worth, my boundaries energetically to know that I could. And so I deal with a lot of my clients have suffered from trauma, as I have. And so I've had a lot of practice on healthy boundaries by being able to, somebody, talking to me, blah, 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 blah. For a long time, I thought that, I was supposed to listen. And yes, I absolutely listen. But to what point, do I need to take care of me and put up a healthy boundary, with love, always with love. And also too, I was the person too who could just be like, and I'd come in, hard and heavy. And I've learned about those healthy boundaries and how to read the energy from another person when they can't state what their boundary is. That's a big one. That was a big one because I just didn't get those signals. But from learning how to work, read, feel, see energy has been life-changing when it comes to healthy boundaries. So that's what I have about healthy boundaries.
Yeah, and I think when I think of healthy boundaries, it's really learning, it's another level of discernment for yourself and self-love. It's like you love yourself so much and you've learned so much about how energy works and doesn't work for you, and how you observe. I love how you said notice it for other people too. You get to start to observe and be more aware of maybe your impact on them too. And so we can start to be a little more kind and compassionate around what, having that discernment, having that self-love. And if people want to say, you're too uptight or you got to stick up your butt or whatever, it's all right. It's okay.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I think that part that you mentioned, Corey, about learning to say no is a critical part of boundaries for light workers, because we're such healers and teachers, and so we kind of feel like we're letting people down if we don't take all the weight of everyone, but we just can't do that, and it's overwhelming. And so it can be really hard to even to have that, like you said, the self-love to be okay saying no And I love the expression, no is a complete sentence, because so many of us don't feel okay saying no. And it's a learning process, but it's so important to learn how to do that. Because if not, we find that ourselves on that downward slide into doing what we don't resonate with, agreeing with things that we don't agree with. So learning to say no is key.
Agreed. Anything else, ladies?
I just think a last little tip for people deciding what their healthy boundaries are is, as you're learning what the energy looks like, if you feel your energy is completely drained or drained after communicating with someone or in a situation, that's also a good indication that maybe a boundary needs to be established at some point, whatever that boundary might look like. So it's looking at if your energy is depleted. And then also if you're sharing something and you're excited and the conversation falls flat and then it just flips to the other person, there's kind of a boundary with that too. So it's looking at who's respecting your boundaries and are you respecting your own? So I think those are a couple other tips to pay attention to. But yeah, it's a big learning curve, learning your boundaries, energetic boundaries.
It is. It is a big curve. And that's wonderful. Peyton, anything else that you'd like to share?
Just to echo what you guys said, which is be gentle with yourself as you learn boundaries, because there's a tendency to overcorrect. And so, if you swing to liking that word no a little too much, be gentle with yourself, because it's something most of us have not been taught. Good boundaries have not been modeled for most of us in our families and in our, social life and communities. And so, be gentle on yourself, always bring, as Corey said, love and compassion to the process, because everybody's learning. We're all learning about boundaries, and you can be the teacher. As you learn, your boundaries, you start to teach everyone around you. So it kind of ripples out. So self-love, compassion for you and for anyone else who's still learning. So.
Oh, I love that. I love that. All right. Well, thank you so much for watching us. We are so grateful that you have joined us. And we have all of our social media links below. And please share, like, and comment. We'd love to have your comments because we'd love to know what you all would like to hear, what you'd like for us to share. So thank you for joining us. And until next time, bye for now.
See you next week.